my name is Mylin Penkiewicz. I am the pedestrian safety coordinator for the city of Phoenix. And with me, I have a lot of folks that work in different cities throughout the valley. We have people from Glendale, we have people from Scottsdale, we have people from Peoria and many other places. So anyone here that works in Phoenix, raise your hand. Very good. Anyone that works in Glendale, raise your hand. There you go. Anyone that works in Surprise, raise your hand. Okay. So we're here from a lot of different areas in the valley, and I wanted to welcome you. We're going to have probably around 3.5, 4 hours of a lot of exciting information about how to help kids cross safely. Just a few housekeeping items. Bathrooms are outside the doors. I think the women's one is to the right when you go out. The men's one's to the left. Everyone should have a manual that has a yellow cover and an agenda. Does everyone have that? If you don't, please raise your hand and someone will get one for you. Okay, that's working. Everyone should have also received a little red ticket. So we're going to be having a raffle. We have some prizes for you guys. And then we're going to get started with this training. I'm going to hand it off to Margaret Herrera. She is one of the people that put together this training from the Maricopa Association of Governments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mylin, very much. And just, wow, this is our 18th. Some of you who may be new to this training, some of you have been attending for the 18 years that we've been holding this. And I'd like to invite the trainers up on the stage. So in the past 2 years, with the pandemic in its height, we hosted virtual crossing guard trainings, and we really thank you all for your patience and your attendance at these events. So these workshops are conducted, as Mylin mentioned, by a team of enthusiastic staff volunteers from a few cities and MAG staff. Without their valuable contributions, holding these workshops would really not be possible. So staff at agencies at this workshop made this workshop possible: Glendale, Peoria, Phoenix, Surprise, and Tempe. So I'm just going to have them introduce themselves briefly, because we have a set of whole new trainers this year. You might see some new faces up here. We're excited to have some new people on board.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brandon Forey with the City of Peoria. I've been involved for the last 18 years with this, and prior to that, with the City of Phoenix. So I'm the grizzled veteran, but we have a great new exciting group of new volunteers to pass the torch on to.
Thank you, Brandon. Hi, my name is Cassandra Johnston. I'm the Traffic Education Program Manager with the City of Glendale's Transportation Department.
Good morning. My name is Stephen Chang. I'm a Senior Transportation Planner with the City of Surprise.
Hello, I am Colleen Rylett, and I am the Transportation Education Assistant for the City of Glendale.
Hi, my name is I'm an engineer with... We couldn't hear you. We couldn't hear you.
Oh, you're good again. It was going out.
Oh, sorry. Couldn't hear me before. My name is Rebecca Foshi. I'm a traffic engineer with the City of Glendale.
Hi, my name is Max Porty. I'm a traffic engineering analyst for the City of Tempe. This is my first year training.
You want to try one more time?
My name is Becca Foshi. I'm a traffic engineer with the City of Glendale.
Thanks for being here. So just really quickly, a little bit about MAG. We're an association made up of 27 cities and towns and 3 native nations in all of Maricopa County, as well as parts of Pinal. MAG is responsible for regional planning in many areas. Some key areas are transportation, freeways, light rail, buses, as well as clean air. A good transportation means not only having good freeway system and a light rail system and bus systems, but our roads must be safe for everyone. Most importantly, we need to make it safe for children to walk and bike to neighborhood schools. This is an important goal of the region. This is why we help organize these workshops, and help you make our roads safer for the children walking and biking to school. You know, we truly admire the valuable service that each one of you provides your communities by helping keep our children safe as they travel between home and school. We also want you to be safe as well, and you will learn a few things at this workshop on how to be safe out there. So the intent of these trainings are really to provide some very basic safety training for all school crossing guards as a regional road safety initiative. All K-8 schools can utilize and train their school crossing guards. However, it is the responsibility, the responsibility remains with each school for hiring, training, defining when the crossing guards will be on duty, so on and so forth. So just want to let you know the materials and the video will be available throughout the year. If you have friends that you want to bring on board, say in January for the next semester, they can get trained as well using the videos and the material. Please remember, as Mylene had mentioned, to provide your comments on the workshop using the evaluation form at the very back of your agenda. We hope that you enjoy this workshop and again, and gain much from this experience as you prepare to start another school year. I would like to thank you again for your valuable service that you provide and wish each one of you a safe year ahead as you perform your duties as crossing guards. Thank you. So we're going to get started. I'm going to introduce Kyle Lane from the city of Peoria. He'll be going through the health and welfare portion of the training. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good morning. Good to be with you all this morning. Thanks for inviting me and to be a part of this training. I really appreciate it. Today we just want to talk about some safety for us or for you as you head back to school. And we want to mainly talk about heat safety and being cool and staying safe and healthy throughout the school year. Next slide. Oh, there we go. Look at that. We're going to talk about overheating, treatment of overheating, and then prevention, which is really the most important part. So, everybody know that we live in a desert? All right. Sometimes it's easy to forget that we live in an extreme environment, right? Although I guess when you walk outside and it's 115, it's a quick reminder. But one of the things that happens is we live in this desert, and did you know the average temperature in August, high temperature is 105 degrees? So when you go back, and this year it seems like it's been hotter, when you go back, you're going to experience this extreme heat, and you got to work outside, right? As far as I know, they haven't built indoor crossing guard stations. Although, these are the people you should probably talk to about that, right? So let's talk about normal body cooling. It's actually the brain that regulates your cooling, your body's cooling. So the brain realizes when you reach 98.6 degrees, you're at kind of the perfect temperature, and as that kind of creeps up, as it feels that, it begins to do cooling measures, right? And so it checks this internal temperature. If you're too cold, what happens if you're too cold? You start shivering, you start to generate body heat, but when you're too hot, the body has to do something, and what does it normally do? Yeah, it sweats. Next slide, please. Yeah, there we go. So sweating works, it's an evaporation idea. Anybody ever had an evaporative cooler? Air conditioning is better, but evaporative cooler? Yeah, so it works that same way, right? As you sweat, water reaches the surface of your skin, and then it's evaporated, and in that process, you cool down, right? And so we're fortunate to live in a dry environment, right, where that happens most of the time. Your sweat gets absorbed into the air, and you cool down. Last week, I was in a training burn. I came out, and I took off my turnouts, and I was like, man, I am not cooling down. I don't know what's wrong. And I'm not drying off, right? What was it last week? Humid, yeah. And so it's harder for that sweat to absorb. It's harder for me to cool down in that process. Next slide, please. So in order to facilitate that cooling process, we need to hydrate, right? If you don't have enough fluid and if you don't have enough minerals in your body to facilitate that sweating, you can't cool down. What's the best way to hydrate? Water, yeah. Anybody have coffee this morning? Yeah, I had a couple cups. That's not really hydrating. That's just coffee. But it gives us energy, right? And then the opposite of hydration is dehydration. And dehydration removes key components to your cooling mechanisms in your body, right? Not just the water, but also minerals. And this is interesting, I think. Your blood begins to thicken. And if your blood thickens, it puts extra stress on your heart and on your lungs. Interesting. Next slide. So, one more. Yeah, so today we're going to talk about this heat-related illness. What is it? It's a term we kind of use, but what is it really? Next slide. So the first part of heat-related illness are heat cramps. Anybody ever gotten a heat cramp? Just one person? Really? Two? Okay. All right, some people don't want to admit it. All right. So this is the mildest form of heat-related illness, and actually, I'm not surprised that so few of you raised your hands. A lot of times we never even feel cramping or we don't get heat cramps. But it's the mildest form. It's usually associated with exercise. So if you're just overheating, you're not really working out, you may not feel these cramps. But what's happening is you're getting low on electrolytes. And what are electrolytes? What's the main one? Do you know? Salt, right? So when you drink Gatorade, you're just drinking salt water, and then they put a bunch of sugar in it, so you'll drink it. Yeah. But these cramps can happen in your legs, your arms, or your stomach. And so you might not always feel them. And if you don't feel them and you're not noticing it, you skip to the next thing, which is heat exhaustion. And that's when the body is in an urgent need to cool itself down. Your internal organs are starting to get affected. And you'll often have heavy sweating. You might feel dizzy. You might feel like you're going to faint. And then you may start having even more muscle cramping. And a lot of times people who are in heat exhaustion will say they have a headache. Anybody get headaches during the summer? A lot of those are associated with that heat exhaustion just from being out in the heat all the time. And it's important at heat exhaustion that we really treat this. We'll talk about treatment in just a second. It's really important we engage and actively treat this because if not, it leads to heat stroke. And heat stroke, this is a medical emergency. If someone's in heat stroke or you think they are, you need to call 911. Okay, this is potentially fatal. All right, and this is when the body temperature reaches usually around 104, and you have altered level of consciousness. You get confused. People are confused, and your skin will be hot and dry. Okay, you've run out of the cooling mechanism. There's no more water, no more electrolytes to be used. You are hot and dry. Okay. People in this state usually vomit, okay? They can't breathe. Their heart feels like it's racing. And again, this is life-threatening. If you feel this way, you need to call 911 or if somebody else is, all right? So let's talk about how we're going to treat these things. All the heat-related illness, there's three things we do first, which is stop the activity, okay, whatever we're doing, right? Then we get to a cool place, okay? And then if possible, we're going to consume clear liquids. Not alcohol or coffee, right? Right. Well, this beer might help you. No, it's not going to help you, right? Okay, so we're talking about water, and we're talking about diluted sports drinks, okay? Probably not straight sports drinks, diluted, okay? We don't need that much electrolytes, but we want to drink those things, okay? Now, moving on, how do we treat heat cramps? Well, for those, it's simple. You get rest, and the cramps will go away, right? Drink out fluid, and then as you rest, those cramps will go away. If they remain for longer than an hour, then you need to go seek some medical help, okay? So get a doctor or go to the urgent care or something, all right? But heat exhaustion, remember that's when we're really sweating, we're being overwhelmed. We need to cool down, like a shower or a bath would help. Garden hose, I guess, if you have it. And you want to get medical help if you have any underlying health problems, right? Heart problems, blood pressure, that sort of thing. All right, and then let's go to heat stroke, because this is the one people are most concerned about. Remember, we're going to call 911. This one's a little different, though. We need to do a rapid cool down. How would you do that? If you had to cool somebody down. Yeah, throw them in the bathtub. What if you didn't have a bathtub? Shower. Pour water on them. Water in this instance is probably better used pouring on them to act as that sweat, right? Versus having them try to drink it, because they're probably vomited up anyway, right? So until the fire truck gets there with paramedics, right? Pour water on them, okay? And you help facilitate that cool down. It's ice packs. Usually in emergency medicine, we don't use any kind of ice packs, but in this instance, we want to use ice packs if we have them, right? Put them under their arms, between their legs, back of the neck. Okay, those are good places to help cool down. Get them wet, fan them off, whatever you need to do to try to bring that body temperature down. All right. The key to handling heat-related illness, though, is prevention, right? We want to avoid all those things if we can. Nobody wants cramps or to be exhausted or to have a heat stroke. So we want to prevent, right? And how do we prevent? Well, we drink lots of fluids. We drink before, during, and after. Now, you may have been sitting inside for the summer, because that'd be the smart thing to do, right, in the air conditioning. Now you're going to go back to work. You may not have been thinking about pre-hydrating, but we want to pre-hydrate. So if you go back to school, let's say on Monday, Sunday, you need to be drinking those fluids and pre-hydrating. And then while you're out there, I assume you can have a water bottle or something while you're doing your crossing, right? So you keep drinking that. And then when you get home, keep drinking, okay? Then we want to avoid fluids with caffeine, which is a bummer, right? I'm not saying no caffeine, because that won't work, but avoid caffeine if we can, and we definitely want to avoid alcohol or large amounts of sugar. When you can, rest in shady areas. I joked about inside crosswalks, but I don't know if there's places where you might have a shade while you're waiting to cross kids, but you want to stay in those, right, out of the sun. And then wear lightweight clothing and a wide-brimmed hat, okay? All right. One of my favorite slides, right? You need to check your urine. Okay? So every time you go to the restroom and you need to check your urine color, okay, and you can see on the screen there, right? Clear? That's good. That means you got plenty of fluids flowing through for the most part. Light yellow, keep drinking, right? You're a little bit behind. Bright yellow or orange, you're kind of getting behind the 8 ball here. We need to keep drinking more and more. And then if you have dark urine, you are significantly behind. Okay, so keep drinking. I know it's a vicious cycle. You drink all that water and you end up in the restroom, but you want to keep doing that. Okay, so besides heat-related illness, we're concerned about the sun, right? Excessive exposure to the sun causes premature aging, cataracts, skin cancer, all things we want to avoid if we can, right? And so here's some signs of skin cancer to look out for, right? You're kind of responsible for yourself, so you got to keep track of these sorts of things, right? If you have any change on your skin, right? If you have scaly, oozing, bleeding nodules, that sounds gross, kind of, right? So if you see those starting to emerge, if you have pigmentation that spreads beyond a border, and that means like if you had a mole, but it's starting to spread now, like you've had it maybe since you were little, but now it's spreading, that's an indication. And then sensation, you can see there itchiness, tenderness, or pain, right? And so along with prevention, we have this cool little graphic here. We want to slip on a shirt, so we want loose-fitting clothing, long sleeves, right? It's tempting to wear shorts and a t-shirt, but you're better off probably in long pants and long sleeves, especially if you're working out in the sun. Slap on sunscreen. You want to make sure it blocks UVA and UVA-B, okay? And SPF 15, I think people say I would go higher than that, right? There's at some point it gets so high that it's not really, you're not getting much effect, but 45 is probably a good one up in that area, right? And generous amounts and reapply it frequently. Have you ever been to the beach and you put it on in the morning and then you have fun in the water and then later you're like, I thought I put sunscreen on, but now I have this horrible sunburn, right? So reapplying is super important. And not just at the pool or the beach. It wears off during the day, right? So you got to keep putting it on. Then slap on a hat, tight weave, wide brim, cover those ears. Still need to put on sunscreen, but cover your ears and face. And then sunglasses are super important to prevent sun damage to your eyes. So you want to wear sunglasses to shade your eyes if possible. All right. So just some final reminders. Take care of yourself. You want to have awareness, treatment, prevention. I know stuff I've said is probably stuff you already know, you've heard 100 times, 1,000 times. But if we don't think about it and we're not intentional about it, we tend to just kind of get lazy, right? And we tend to forget, I'm not going to put on sunscreen today, or I think I drank enough. We want to be real intentional about staying healthy, right? Because you do an important job. And so you want to be healthy and ready to go. All right. Questions? Hopefully We're not too far behind schedule. It's hard to see you. Also, I feel like I should tell a joke in this spotlight. Oh, we got one in the back. Here we go.
It's going to the prior question before on, I just want to know if it's a myth on when you're hot and you had to be cooled down, you know how you said for you to either put water on top of them or under, or get something really cold and put it under their armpit? They won't get like a little stroke with that, like going from heat to cold, because you know, Hispanic people, they're like, if you're sweating, don't put cold water on top of you. Is that a myth?
Yeah, so the question was, is it a myth that if you're super hot and then you put coolness on you, are you going to get a stroke or something? No. When we need to cool down, we need to cool down, right? And that shock, it's not going to cause a stroke. And they probably won't even feel the shock if they're at that point. So better to get cooled down, right? Because they're in a critical emergency there, yeah. But that doesn't really have to do one with the other. Yeah, great question, though. All right. Well, I know there's a lot going to go on today, so if I don't see any more hands, I will step down. But thank you so much. Thanks for what you do. Until I started doing this, I think Brandon and I figured maybe 7 years ago, I never really thought about crossing guards, and then I sat through the presentation a few times. I'm like, wow, there's a lot to it. A lot of moving parts. And so, hey, thanks. You're professionals, and you have an important job keeping those kids safe. So have a great school year.
Good morning, everyone. So the Maricopa Association of Governments has put together a short video that kind of covers some of the basic things that you guys are going to need to know. There's 5 chapters to the video, and we're going to pause after each one, just have a quick discussion and take any questions that you have. We do have a limited amount of time for questions, so if you could just keep your questions to just the kind of the content in each section, that would be great. All of us trainers do have these high-vis vests on, so if you have other questions or we didn't get to your question, feel free to come up to us during the break or at the end of the training and ask us whatever questions that you have. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started with chapter 1 of the video.
The first step in becoming a crossing guard is to understand your basic equipment. In this chapter, you will learn about the obvious and not so obvious items required to perform your duties as a crossing guard. Basic crossing guard equipment would include your bright yellow vest, your stop paddle, and the portable signs that go out into the roadway at your crossing location. Make sure you always wear your safety vest when working, and make sure it is bright and clean. Not only is the vest mandatory, it is the single most important item that allows you to be seen by drivers. Your safety vest is bright orange or fluorescent yellow-green. Besides making you more visible to drivers, it establishes your authority over the crosswalks. Always wear your vest over your jacket or raincoat. The next most important item to get the attention of drivers is your stop paddle. Keep the stop paddle clean and in good condition. If it gets faded or damaged, get a replacement from your school or school district. Other vital components of your crossing guard toolkit are the portable signs, which are also provided by your school district. We'll discuss the proper placement of these signs in a later chapter. An area often overlooked by crossing guards is health and safety. The hot sun, dehydration, and high-volume traffic areas are just some of the issues that Arizona crossing guards face. There are materials you can use to protect yourself. Let's begin with protection from the sun. Wearing a bright orange or yellow-green hat will protect your head and face from the sun and keep you more visible. Keeping water with you at your crossing location will help prevent dehydration. In case of emergency, it is important to have a two-way radio or cell phone with you. This will allow you to contact the school office, 911, or report suspicious activities if needed. If you do have a cell phone, remember that it may only be used in an emergency. The health and welfare of the children and families you cross every day is another important part of your job as a crossing guard. You are often the front line for the school when a child is sick or hurt at the crosswalk. You are also able to observe if any of your children or their family members are having hydration issues.
Okay, so one of the most important points for me in that chapter was, you need to keep yourself safe first so that you can keep the children safe. If you're not safe, you won't be able to keep them safe. And your vest is one of your most important pieces of safety equipment. Helps keep you visible to drivers. And the more of the vest that the driver can see, the better they'll be able to see you. So it's really important that you keep the vest over your clothing and zipped up. If the vest comes unzipped, then you're reducing how much area the drivers can see. So you can see when I open up the vest that, a large portion of my torso isn't covered by that reflective material. So it's really important that you keep that vest zipped up, and it's important you have one in the right size so that, if you're wearing a jacket in the wintertime, it can still get over your clothes and be zipped up and be comfortable for you to move around in. So we'd encourage you, if you don't have a vest that's the right size for you, to ask your principal to try and get a vest that's in the right size. Are there any questions on the material that was in Chapter 1? If not, we'll go ahead and move on to Chapter 2, which is going to cover yellow crosswalks.
The yellow crosswalk is your domain. It's up to you to make sure that children use it safely. In this chapter, you will learn how to set up and operate the yellow crosswalk. Yellow crosswalks have a 15-mile-per-hour speed limit as mandated by state law. That speed limit is only in effect when the portable signs are in the roadway. The lower speed limit begins at the first 15-mile-per-hour sign on approach to the crosswalk. It ends once the motorists pass the crosswalk, where they are permitted to resume driving at the normal posted speed. Passing another vehicle in a 15-mile-per-hour school zone is strictly prohibited by law. Permanent school Pentagon signs are installed by the local agency in advance of all school crosswalks to warn motorists of upcoming school crossings. It is your job to place the portable signs in the street at your 15-mile-per-hour school crossing. You need to get these signs in the street in the proper sequence, usually 45 minutes before school starts. To help you, there may be yellow dots painted on the street to show you exactly where to place your signs. The first sign to be installed is the No Passing 15-mile-per-hour school in session sign. Place it on the yellow dot that is located in advance of the crosswalk. Next, you will place another No Passing 15-mile-per-hour school in session sign in advance of the crosswalk for the opposite directions of traffic. On some busier streets, you may have more than one 15-mile-per-hour portable sign to position on approaches to the crosswalk. It is important to let drivers know they are approaching a 15-mile-per-hour school crossing before they near the yellow crosswalk. So all of the portable 15-mile-per-hour signs must be placed where they belong before you position the Stop for Children in Crosswalk signs. These signs get placed on the center line of the street right at the crosswalk, so they can be seen easily by motorists coming from both directions. For wider, busier streets, you may have more than one of these signs for each approach. It is very important that all of your signs are in place and clearly visible to oncoming traffic. If you have questions about sign placement or if you need a new sign, please contact the school principal. Once the students have finished crossing, the signs need to be removed no later than 30 minutes after the final class has been dismissed. You do this in precisely the reverse order from which you put the signs out. First, remove the Stop When Children in Crosswalk sign. Then remove one of the 15-mile-per-hour school in session signs, then the other, until all the signs have been removed from the street. Be sure to store your signs in a secure and safe place off the street or in the schoolyard. Signs shall not block the sidewalk, and turn them away from the street so that drivers are not confused by seeing them when the 15-mile-per-hour speed limit is not in effect. If a school crossing is located directly adjacent to the school, the portable signs may be allowed to stay up for the entire school day. A signed agreement must exist between the school district and the local authority to allow for this. But if the crosswalk is not adjacent to a school, the signs must be removed before you leave your area or go off duty. Sometimes this means the signs have to be placed and removed several times a day. Doing so encourages motorists to be more willing to comply with the 15-mile-per-hour speed limits when needed. If this is a situation at your school crossing, make sure you place and remove the portable signs in the correct sequence each time you do it. Before we move on, there is one critical point we need to make. The signs do not automatically protect you from motorists. This is why it is required to wear your bright reflective vest. Your vest and hat make you more visible to drivers. Wait for appropriate gaps in traffic before you attempt to place your signs. If necessary, get someone from the school, such as a maintenance worker, to help you by observing traffic and advising you of potentially dangerous situations. Ask your school's principal to assign help if you need assistance. Once your signs are in place, your next major responsibility is to work with the children. You need to establish your authority as the person running the crosswalk right at the beginning of the school year. Of course, you want the children to like you, but it is more important that they respect you, take direction from you, and learn from you. Make sure they don't arrive at school too early. Confirm with your school the appropriate time for their arrival. Work with your principal to define safe places for the children to wait if they arrive early. It is important that you cross the children in groups, not individually. Make sure there is a safe gap in traffic before you step out into the street. Make eye contact with the drivers to make sure that they see you. Once you are sure all oncoming drivers see you from both directions, walk to the middle of the crosswalk with your stop paddle held high. Instruct the children to look left, right, and left again before entering the street. Tell the children to walk quickly across the street. Don't let them play, run or ride bikes or scooters, or use wheel shoes in the crosswalk. And keep your eye on traffic the entire time you occupy the crosswalk. Keep your paddle high even after the children are safe on the other side of the street until you step up on the curb and are out of harm's way. Teach the children the proper way to cross the street by doing it the right way yourself. Stop before entering the street, look left, then right, then left again, waiting for a safe gap in traffic. Making eye contact with the drivers is a key ingredient to safety. Make sure that drivers are paying attention to you and really see you. Remember, your responsibility is to see to it that the children arrive safely at school. If you feel that you need additional help to get the job done properly, speak to your school principal and get some help. So let's review. Always arrive at your crosswalk about an hour before school starts. Begin placing your portable signs 45 minutes before school starts. Put out the no passing 15-mile-per-hour school zone signs first on the yellow dots in advance of the crosswalk. First on approach to the crosswalk and then the other. Place the Stop for Children in Crosswalk signs last on the center line right at the crosswalk. Group the children away from the curb or roadway and wait for a safe gap before stepping into the crosswalk. Make sure you make eye contact with the drivers and don't just look at the cars. Make sure the driver really sees you. No matter who you are or what you're doing, there will always be motorists who will not stop for you. Make sure the children walk across the street quickly and without fooling around. Running, playing, riding bicycles, scooters, or wheeled shoes are not permitted. Maintain your position in the center of the crosswalk and signal the children to cross. Keep your stop paddle high above your head even after the children are across the street until you have returned to the curb. Now you are protecting yourself. Don't ever let a student do your job for you. And this is very important. Don't direct traffic. The motorists will automatically move forward when you are out of the street. Your stop paddle is lowered and it is safe for them to proceed. You are not a member of the police force. Only a trained and sworn police officer can direct traffic. It is not your job to stop speeders or drivers that are passing other cars. Your job is to protect the safety of the children and yourself, period. You can report any traffic concerns to the city's Street Transportation Department through your principal.
There's just a couple of points I want to reiterate here. The first is that we need to give clear visual cues to the drivers as to our intent. So if we're prepared to cross the children, we need to look both ways, and we need to really make eye contact with the drivers and not just look at the cars. They may be distracted with their cell phones or other kids in their cars, but we need to make eye contact, make sure they see us before we step out into the street. With our paddles held high so they know exactly what we're doing. And also, when we're not intending to cross the kids, we need to give them, the drivers, clear visual cues as well. We need to step back from the curb, our paddles are down, and we're holding the kids back. So this way, they know that they can proceed safely and that we're not going to cross the street. Are there any questions for this chapter?
Yes, I have a question on window tinting. I've noticed a lot that they're having the limo tint over the front window, so it's impossible to see who's in the driver's seat. What are your suggestions to that when you can't see the driver when they're coming up on you and they're not slowing down?
So the question is, what about window tinting when it's so dark that you can't see the drivers? First of all, that may be a law enforcement issue as far as tinting the front windshield. The second, I think, it's you have to do your best. If you really can't see them, you really have to pay attention to what the car is doing. Are they slowing down a bit? Are they not slowing down? I think the key point is to not just think it's safe. Okay, I put my paddle up, it's safe, so I'm going to step out into traffic. But to really look at the cars, if you can't see, make eye contact with them, make sure you really know what the car is doing before you step out onto the street. Okay. Maybe one other question, if there are any? Okay, if not, we'll go on to chapter 3.
Another type of crosswalk you will encounter as a crossing guard is a white crosswalk. In this chapter, you will learn how to operate white crosswalks at 4-way stop locations, 2-way stop locations, and other variations of the two. Under state law, white crosswalks have different rules and regulations than yellow crosswalks. Schools are not required to provide a crossing guard at these locations. The decision to place a trained crossing guard at a white crossing would be up to the school. The location and length of time for the crossing guard to be at these locations would be determined by individual schools and their hours of operation. Your role in a white crosswalk is to provide assistance to school children crossing the location during school operation hours. This does not change the importance and vital role the crossing guard plays at these locations. The basics are still the same. You need your reflective vest, a stop paddle, a bright yellow or orange hat, water, cell phone or radio, and sunscreen to keep yourself visible and hydrated at your crossing location. Where you will notice the biggest change is in the setup of the crosswalk. White crosswalks are not allowed by state law to operate in combination with 15 mile per hour or stop when children in crosswalk portable signs. Not having to handle the portable signs allows the crossing guard at a white crosswalk to concentrate on the most important part of the job, crossing children safely. Let's discuss the types of intersections that have white crosswalks. One such location is a four-way stop intersection. These areas have white crosswalks on all four sides of the intersection to match the stop signs. These locations can be operated with either one or two crossing guards. We will discuss both options. If you are one crossing guard operating the four-way stop, it is very important to choose the right side to stand on to greet the children. This is especially important in the morning at arrival. You will need to stand across from the school where the most children cross. At the beginning of the school year, you may not be sure exactly where that is. It will only take a day or two to find out. How many children cross and when they cross can change over the school year as well. Stay in contact with your school principal for any changes to the crossing patterns. As one crossing guard at a four-way stop, you can cross up to 3 sides of the street to get children to school. It is vital that you are in control of the crosswalk and that you understand how to facilitate crossing at each corner. If you need to cross 3 corners, you will start with the corner you are on, then follow a U pattern until you are on the other corner of the school. If you have 2 corners to cross, you will cross the students in an L pattern. You will hold the kids at your starting corner while you cross the children from the opposite corner to you. Once you and the children have come out of the street and return to your starting corner, you will then cross the group in the closest crosswalk to the school to complete the pattern. The crossing patterns are much easier with a second crossing guard. Heavy pedestrian and vehicle traffic at four-way intersections often require the schools to consider hiring a second crossing guard. They can be extremely helpful to maintain a safe crossing area in this situation. In a 2 crossing guard situation, each guard will be responsible for 2 corners. Communication between the 2 guards is crucial to the success of the crossing and safety of the children. A more common type of crosswalk location is a two-way stop intersection. White crosswalks can be painted on 2 or 3 sides of the intersection or placed next to a yellow crosswalk.
The challenge of operating the white crosswalk at a two-way stop location is looking out for the direction of traffic without stop control. If you have 2 corners to cross, you will cross the students in an L pattern. You will hold the kids at your starting corner while you cross the children from the opposite corner to you. Once you and the children have come out of the street and returned to your starting corner, you will then cross a group in the closest crosswalk to the school to complete the pattern. Some white crosswalks at two-way stop locations have a yellow crosswalk next to them. This is a different type of crossing challenge. You will be required to set up the portable signs for the yellow crosswalk and operate the crosswalk along with the white crosswalks. The yellow crosswalks will be on the side without a stop sign. To cross students, you will need to use the L pattern or the U pattern. So let's review. Always remember to wear your bright reflective vest and bright hat. Have a clean stop paddle, water, sunscreen, and a two-way radio or cell phone. Find the corner where the majority of your children need to cross, especially for morning arrival. When operating a white crosswalk at a two-way or a four-way stop location, remember to use the L or U crossing pattern, depending on the amount of crosswalks at the intersection.
Whether you are crossing children in a white or yellow crosswalk, you serve a vital role in the lives of the children you cross. They look to you to protect their safety and ensure that they arrive at school in good health and ready to learn.
So one thing that was just kind of briefly mentioned in that section of the video I wanted to emphasize was if you're working with another crossing guard, it's really important that you coordinate your movements, both so that you can cross the children efficiently, but also so that you can avoid disrupting traffic unnecessarily. If one guard goes and the other guard goes right after them when they could have gone at the same time, it might encourage drivers to, try to go through the intersection before the guards go out, or try to cut the line or something like that. So we want to make sure that we keep the children safe and also allow drivers to go through so that they don't get impatient and maybe create a safety issue there. Are there any questions on that chapter of the video?
I have I'm at a cross, white lines, and I wanted to understand, can a car make a right turn if you're in the crosswalk halfway?
So this is something that'll be covered a little bit more in the law enforcement side in that presentation later. Well, I'll let them cover that because they'll be the experts on that. So if they don't answer that question, make sure you bring it up to them. I don't want to, speak for them on that. Are there any other questions?
No other questions? Really? Need a little jolt of caffeine? No questions? Okay.
Okay, if there's no other questions, we'll move on to Chapter 4, which is going to cover crossing scenarios at traffic signals.
Signalized intersections often carry heavier volumes of traffic traveling at higher speeds. This traffic, mixed with pedestrians, can be challenging. In this chapter, you will learn how to operate white crosswalks at these locations and how best to keep yourself and the children you cross safe. Crosswalks are typically painted on all sides of the intersection. Crossing duties can be performed by either 1 or 2 guards, depending on the amount of traffic volume at your location. There are benefits to employing 2 guards instead of 1, which we will discuss later in the chapter. Your basic crossing equipment is even more crucial when you are a crossing guard at a signal. Drivers are often traveling at higher speeds, so the importance of being visible cannot be overstated. Some signalized intersections have push buttons that control the walk, don't walk light and the walk cycle for the intersection. If your signal has a button, you will be able to push it to activate the walk cycle at the intersection. Once you have a group of children ready to cross and you have pushed the button and you receive the walk signal, you should look to make sure the crosswalk is clear. Then raise your stop paddle high so drivers can see it as you enter the street. Quickly motion to the children to enter the crosswalk while monitoring the amount of available walk time. If the time has run out on the walk cycle, hold the children at the corner until the next crossing cycle. Never allow children to cross against the signal, and don't ever try to extend the crossing time by staying longer in the street with your stop paddle. Extending the crossing time creates motorist disrespect for the operation of the crosswalk.
Traffic signals are typically programmed to work in sequence with nearby signals. All you have to do is push the walk button once before you cross. Even though the light may not change immediately, it will within a minute or so, and the walk signal will appear. Rushing or trying to anticipate the signal can do more harm than good.
Understanding how to operate the crosswalk while using the pedestrian push button as a guide will help keep you and the children safe. There are 3 different phases that you should be aware of that will help you be a more effective crossing guard at traffic signals. The first is the walk phase. This phase is self-explanatory. It means what it says. It is important to keep your eye on motorists who may run the red light or who might be turning right or left from a side street. This is why you need to make eye contact with the drivers and not just watch the cars. The second phase is when the light turns to don't walk and is flashing. Some jurisdictions have a countdown instead of a flashing hand. The flashing hand or countdown is a warning not to start crossing the street if you haven't already. If you are in the street when the don't walk signal begins, you still have ample time to cross. The third phase is the solid don't walk. The solid don't walk signal means don't cross. Stay out of the street on the sidewalk as far away from the curb as possible until the next walk signal appears. Motorists are not allowed to enter the crosswalk making right or left-hand turns in the portion occupied by the crossing guard. Using a second crossing guard offers more control of the crossing area. 2 guards would position themselves in the same crosswalk at the same time, discouraging traffic from entering the crossing from any direction. So let's review. Staying visible with the basic equipment is the key to your safety and the children you cross. Using the pedestrian push button effectively will assist with creating the necessary gaps in traffic to cross the children. Remember the 3 walk, don't walk phases. Walk on the walk signal, finish crossing, and don't start a new crossing when the don't walk is flashing. And don't cross at all when the don't walk signal is solid and the light is red.
So there are a couple of issues I want to elaborate on here. The first one is that when the walk signal comes on, you really want to check for right and left turn vehicles, because a lot of times they're just looking for the green lights. They're not really looking for pedestrians. So again, look for right turn and left turn vehicles, make eye contact, and really make sure that they see you before you step out onto the crosswalk. And then at a signal, time management is very important. So once you're in the sidewalk during the walk cycle, and everything's safe, and you wave the kids to enter the crosswalk, if by that time that the flashing don't walk has already started, and if it happens consistently, you may want to talk with your principal to ask a city traffic engineer to lengthen that walk time. So when the kids actually step out onto the crosswalk, that it's during the walk cycle, not the flash and don't walk cycle. And most traffic signals will have a pedestrian countdown clock. Make sure you keep an eye on that. Make sure you encourage the kids to walk quickly across a crosswalk before the countdown ends. And also, the video mentioned, do not try to extend that crossing time by staying in the crosswalk with your stop paddles. And that's not only dangerous, it disrupts traffic, and it really frustrates the drivers. Okay, are there any questions in this chapter?
Could you elaborate again on who our principal can speak with? For example, at one of the lighted intersections that I cover, by the time I'm in the crosswalk, the kids get across the street, and then I'm coming back. I barely have time to get back to the corner. Oftentimes I have to jog because it seems like that light cycle is very short.
Okay. So the question is, who would you have to speak with as far as changing the amount of time at a pedestrian signal at a signal? So we encourage you to talk to your principals first and have your principal ask either a city traffic engineer, transportation department. Each city is organized differently. So really should go through your traffic engineering department. And then they can, usually what you want to do is lengthen the walk time. The flashing don't walk is timed usually based on the length of the crosswalk. So the walk time is what you want to lengthen, to extend.
I just want to add to that. Everybody, the packet that you got today, I think it's one of the first sheets, actually has a list of contacts for traffic engineering or transportation, as well as police department. So those are the contacts in there. Again, we do encourage you to go through your principal to make sure that the request is coming from the school, and we have one point of contact for the cities. But those contact information, all that contact information is in the packet that you have. I think there was a question over here.
I noticed that on the main lights, there's a lot of lines. What street, why do they have so many lines on those special streets? Like white lines just going across. I'm like, where is that area at? Because I'm on 36th Street in Thomas, and I cross the kids from Big Five going to Jackson, but I have not seen, those are really bright painted lines on the streets. And I'm just wondering, why are those lines, are they more important to different stage, I don't know.
It's the question, I'm not answering the question.
I think I know the question. Certain crosswalks have what we call a ladder style or a continental style where you see the crosswalk lines are in the opposite direction from the long lines from the crosswalk, so they're more visible. Is that your question? Yes, that was the question. Why do some locations have the high visibility crosswalks?
Right, instead of just the two lines, there are lines across. Right, as Brandon said, those are ladder crosswalks. It's just for visibility, I believe. Do you have anything else to add? I think it's just for visibility.
So the question is, why do some locations have those and others don't? I'll take a stab at it from Peoria's perspective. It's optional to have the crosswalks marked with high visibility. There's not a requirement one way or the other. So it's an option if a city chooses to put the extra markings out there. The reality is there's a lot of additional maintenance and cost for those crosswalks. So that's why they're not done everywhere. But it is kind of a location by location optional option, but it varies from city to city as well. If you'd like to see that, my best recommendation would be that you ask your principal to make the request on behalf of the school. In this case, in your case, the city of Phoenix. Yeah, it would be to contact the city of Phoenix. Sure. So the request is there's a lot of older people crossing. So whatever the conditions are, you would just want your principal to contact the city of Phoenix and make whatever case there is that say, well, there's a lot of pedestrians, there's a lot of students, there's a lot of elderly people crossing there. Whatever the circumstances are, you would just want your principal to convey that to the city representative when they contact them. Yeah.
Okay, I think it's time to move on to our 5th chapter.
Like anything else in life, crossing devices and locations are always changing and evolving. Local government agencies want to make crossing safer to encourage more walking to school. Technology is helping to improve crossing safety. All across Arizona, there are examples of this technology at work.
In this chapter, we are going to discuss how these devices affect you, the crossing guard. The first example we will discuss is the Hawk signal, or high-intensity activated crosswalk beacon. It is a pedestrian-activated signal that only is active after the pedestrian pushes the walk button. Hawk signals have white, ladder-style crosswalks and are only installed on high-volume major streets. You will know you are at a Hawk by the unique style signal heads. A crossing guard's first responsibility at one of these locations is to make sure to activate the signal. Once the signal has turned on and traffic has stopped, you would cross children the same way you would at a regular traffic signal. One issue that you have to watch out for are cars that turn into the crosswalk while you are trying to cross the children. The drivers on the opposite side of the Hawk will be at a stop sign and may get impatient as they wait to turn. Your position in the crosswalk will be important in discouraging motorists from turning into the crosswalk area. The Hawk signal will go through 4 phases: flashing yellow, solid red, flashing red, and back to black or off. Phase 1 for the Hawk signal is the flashing yellow phase. The flashing yellow lights are to warn drivers to either slow down to a stop or, if feasible, continue through the intersection before the Hawk signal goes into the second phase, the solid red phase, and pedestrians are allowed to cross. In the solid red phase, drivers in the approach directions of the Hawk signal are required to stop. cross traffic will have stop signs and will be required to stop as well. Pedestrians from the opposite approach will receive a walk sign from the pedestrian head, encouraging them to cross the street. The third phase is the flashing red phase. This phase is the most confusing to drivers. The law allows drivers to proceed through the Hawk intersection on a flashing red light if their half of the roadway is clear of pedestrians. Drivers will often err on the side of caution and wait until the signal has gone into its final phase. This indecision by drivers will require crossing guards to pay close attention. The fourth and final phase is when the signal heads are black or off. Drivers in the approach directions to the Hawk signal are allowed to proceed, while vehicles and pedestrians in the opposite approach directions are required to stop. Being aware of the phases will enable you to cross children more efficiently. Another type of crossing you may have to work at is a two-stage crosswalk. The crosswalk is painted in a white ladder style and is typically located on major streets in mid-block locations. This type of crossing allows pedestrians to cross 1/2 the width of roadway at a time. The median islands are designed to force walkers to look at the traffic before they try to enter the roadway. 2 guards are more effective to cross children at these locations. Each guard would be responsible for 1/2 of the street and one direction of traffic. A few crossing locations are now getting stutter flash devices. These are also pedestrian activated and are designed to get the attention of motorists. When they are activated, the light from the device flashes light at the drivers. They can be installed at either white or yellow crosswalks. They are typically found on major streets with a high volume of traffic. They do not slow down traffic like the 15-mile-per-hour portable signs, so you need to make sure to make eye contact with drivers as you are getting ready to cross children.
No matter what type of crosswalk or traffic control device you have at your location, protecting student safety as they cross the street will be the one part of your job that will never change. Thank you for all you do and for truly being guardians of the future.
So this chapter covered new technology, and I just wanted to get a sense of how many of you work at a location with one of these types of devices. Okay, so since there's just a couple of you, if you do have questions, feel free to come up to any of the trainers during the break or after. But if any of you that don't currently work at one of these, if you find yourself working at one of these types of locations in the future, this training is going to be available for review on the Maricopa Association of Governments website in just a couple weeks, so you can always come back and review that material in the future if you need to. I just wanted to thank all of you for all you do to keep children in our community safe. We're actually going to go on a break now, so we're going to be back in 10 minutes and do some crossing guard scenarios at that point. So thank you.
All right, welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoy your goodies. Thank you for being here today. My name is Cassandra. I work with the City of Glendale. So in this segment of the workshop, we are going to talk you through 9 different crossing guard scenarios. So these were filmed in real time. So we get the luxury of watching real crossing guards working with real children and real traffic. So they might seem a little bit redundant after a few of them, but we are breaking them down into little variations for each one that we feel is necessary for you to see and to discuss. For instance, I will be going over the 4-way stops, Colleen will be discussing the 2-way stops, and Max will be discussing the traffic signal crossings. Each one has a little bit of variations in them. We will be talking about the different crossing patterns, such as the straight leg, the L pattern, and the U pattern. So with that, go ahead and begin the video. And I'm going to stop and start in between. This first video is a 4-way stop, 1 crossing guard, single leg. Stop video, please. So before we begin, I do want to take this time to remind you of some of the safety precautions that you've been hearing in the Guardians of the Future video. So the first one being your vest. Please ensure that your vest is zipped all the way so that you are covered on all sides with that reflective coloring. The next one is to be aware of your surroundings on all sides. We tend to want to focus our attention on the students crossing in front of us, but we also need to make sure that we know what's going on the sides of us and the back of us. So just making sure you're turning your head and looking around at all times for everyone's safety. And finally, the video talked a lot about making that eye contact with the drivers and doing the best that you can to kind of monitor traffic and make sure you find that natural break in traffic. And then also putting up your stop paddle high above your head before taking a step into the crosswalk. These are all clear signals to everyone around you that traffic should be stopping and you're approaching the roadway. Okay, so I've got my pointer here. All right, we're at our four-way stop, one crossing guard, single leg. She's aware of her surroundings. She looked left, right, left. Her stop paddle was held up high above her head before stepping foot into the crosswalk. And you're going to see her stop in the middle of the crosswalk. So she's doing a straight leg, which means one direction. Okay, she makes sure that everything is clear before signaling to the students to cross. The students will not enter the crosswalk until she gives the signal to do so. Stop video, please. She is following the students back to the corner that she started on with her stop paddle held high the entire time. So here's what I want to point out. You may be wondering where to position yourself in the crosswalk. Which line are you going to stand on? So we have this inner line and we have this outer line. Rule of thumb, it is your judgment call where you're going to position yourself, but a good rule of thumb is to look around at all the stops and see where the most approaching traffic is coming from. You want to place yourself as a barrier in between the students and the traffic. So in this instance, we don't see any traffic over here. We can't see the other stops. She notices that this car is approaching, so she positioned herself on this outer line as a barrier in between the students and on the most approaching traffic. So just keep that in mind when you are by yourself. It is a judgment call on your behalf where you position yourself on the line. All right, next video. So in this next video, we also have a four-way stop, same crossing guard, and this time it will be an L pattern. So she'll be crossing in two different patterns. She goes to the middle, she positions herself on this inner line. She determines that's where the most approaching traffic will be. She signals for the students to cross, and she follows them back with her stop paddle held high the entire time. She's waiting for the students to cross safely. She's finding that natural break in traffic. You notice the car went by there, so she let that car go before approaching the intersection again. Now she calls the second group of students to approach the intersection, making sure that they are walking safely. Her stop paddle is held up high the entire time. She positioned herself between the most approaching traffic and follows them back. And finally, we have a four-way stop, the L pattern again, but this time there are two crossing guards working together. So we don't need the second crossing guard. He's standing over here. She crosses her first group of students on the first leg of the L pattern. She's determining to position herself on this inner line where the most approaching traffic is coming from. She's asking these students here that have approached while she was in the middle of the intersection to wait. Stop video, please. Notice how she found that natural break in traffic. We don't want to impede traffic in that natural flow, so she allowed this car to turn before approaching that second leg of the L pattern. So if you see that traffic has been waiting and you've crossed your first group, let the traffic go and then make your second group go. So now she'll coordinate with the crossing guard you'll see over here. They have some kind of signal to one another. They do not need to go to the middle this time because there's two of them. that you only have to go about a quarter of a way on each side. The only thing I want to point out here, if you can stop video, notice how they're both standing on the same exact line, on the inner line. So a better approach to this, especially when you have two crossing guards, is you could have one on the inner line and one standing on the outer line, so on opposite sides of one another. And that will help ensure that traffic isn't turning on either side and that you have control of the students and you're working together. So it's a lot easier when you have two crossing guards. Position yourselves on opposite sides of that crosswalk. When you're single crossing guard, you will have to make that judgment call. You always want to put yourself where you're the most visible and as a barrier in between students and the most approaching traffic. Okay, finished video. So the students will walk back to their corner and the one crossing guard follows with his stop paddle held high and the other crossing guard went back to her post. Before we go to the next video, I did want to point out one question that you might have is, where do you choose to stand in the mornings? So it was mentioned in the video earlier. In the mornings, you'll have to, at the beginning of the school year, figure out where you see the majority of the students coming from and what corner most of them are waiting. So once you do that, you'll know that that's the corner you want to put yourself at in the mornings. In the afternoons, it's a little bit different. You'll be closest, the corner closest to the school in the afternoons. But the mornings, they could be coming from all different directions. So find the corner that the majority of students are approaching and place yourself on that corner. Are there any questions for that segment, the four-way stops? Ned? All right, so I will hand the mic over to my colleague Colleen, and she will discuss two-way stops.
All right, hello everybody. I am Colleen, and I am going to walk you through the next 3 scenarios of two-way stops. All right, so this is the two-way stop with one crossing guard and an L crossing. Go ahead and pause the video. There's a couple things that we've been seeing through the Guardians of the Future video, and then also what Cassandra just pointed out that I'm going to cover as well. Again, it may seem redundant, but all of these things are very important, and so we'd like to reiterate each and every thing as we are walking through these scenarios because they are very important for the children's safety and for your safety. So the first thing I want to point out is we did talk about how we do want our crossing guard vests zipped up. You'll notice hers is open. It is not allowing her to be as visible to the traffic. So we do want to make sure that our crossing guard vests are zipped up the entire way. Also, as we are inside the crosswalk, we would like to position ourselves closer to the outer line. She's kind of in the middle line, which doesn't leave a whole lot of room for these students to walk. This little boy right here is walking on the line, which isn't as safe. And so just make sure that as you are choosing where you're standing, you're positioning yourself closer to the outer line to leave that space for the students. All right, go ahead and start the video. All right, notice her stop paddle is up high. The students are walking across to the other side, and she is now following them. She is going to walk them across that other leg of the crosswalk. She has her hand out, telling them not to go yet. Okay, now she's waving her hand so they know it is safe to cross. She continues to hold her stop paddle up high, and the students are walking across safely. Okay, there's one more thing. Go ahead and pause the video. Okay, so if you noticed this car, it was right here as she was walking the students across this part of the crosswalk. This car technically could have turned, but a lot of times cars will be extra cautious and more aware in a school zone, which is a really great thing. So it is not our jobs as crossing guards to motion cars to move on. So it was perfectly okay that that car did not choose to turn yet and waited until she was out of that crosswalk, even though they could have. Okay, next. Okay, this next scenario video is a two-way stop with one crossing guard, but it is a U crossing. So again, she looked both ways. She's walked out into the middle of the crosswalk. Her stop paddle is up high, and she's walking those students across the street. Okay, go ahead and pause the video here just for a second. One thing I want to point out right here that was really awesome that she did, or that she's doing now, is she is making sure that she is looking around, making sure she's aware of her surroundings, but she is going to allow this car to go through. And so she's making it very obvious that she's not getting ready to step out into that other crosswalk. Sometimes when we're standing toward the edge of the curb and we're kind of leaning in back and forth, it may confuse drivers and they might not know if we're going to cross or not. She's holding her hands back to protect the students, but she's also just kind of looking around, showing that she's going to give that car an opportunity to drive through. Okay, go ahead. All right, so again, she's walking to the middle of the crosswalk with the stop paddle held high. Now she's motioning for those students. It's safe to cross. There's another thing in this video that I'm going to point out. There's a motorist that's coming up right here. I want you to pay attention to the motorist. Okay, go ahead and pause the video. Okay. There are some things when we are crossing students that are unsafe that other people do. It just happens. And so one of the things that I want to reiterate is we are not law enforcement, and it is not our job to direct traffic. Our number one job is to keep ourselves and students safe and to cross them safe in that crosswalk. So this motorist right here, he slowed down, but he never officially stopped. And then this is actually the turning lane, and he's actually going to end up going straight. He does not turn. So he did do some illegal things. It could make you angry inside, but again, that is not our job as crossing guards to direct or do any sort of law enforcement with the traffic. So the kids are safe, she is safe, and she has finished crossing across the crosswalk. Okay? And she's also allowing that car to go before she gets to her third leg, where there were students waiting on this corner. You'll see them approaching right now, and they are walking across the crosswalk to get to school. And then she's walking back with the students. All right, and our third scenario is a two-way stop with two crossing guards and an L crossing. So the first crossing guard is putting her stop paddle high, walking to the middle of that crosswalk, gathering those students as they are walking across. Go ahead and pause the video for just a second. One other thing that I want to point out, it doesn't happen in this video, but I just want to point it out because it is important. In all of these videos, you'll notice that all of the students are grouped together in a cluster, and we do want clusters of students before we cross. We do not want to only be crossing one or two students at a time, and then the other kids are way down at the other end of the street, and we're having to stop traffic for a really long time for a little ant trail of students. What we would like to see is waiting till we have a group or cluster and then crossing them all together at the same time, because it prevents us from having to stop traffic as much. Okay, go ahead and play. All right, once she gets to this other side, she has to coordinate with this other crossing guard right here. So it's important that she is making direct eye contact or some sort of visual cue. See, she's allowing these cars to go. So the other crossing guard needed to be aware that it wasn't time to step out into the street yet. You'll notice that each crossing guard is on either side of the crosswalk, so the students are walking between them. They are protecting them as a barrier between the traffic. And then as the kids are walking across, both crossing guards will go back to their original position on the corner that they started on. All right, go ahead and pause for the next one. Okay, does anybody have any questions regarding those three scenarios? Correct. You will only ever cross students in an L crossing or a U crossing. Okay, so let me repeat the question. So what she's asking is that you will only cross students in an L-shaped crossing, or you will only cross students in a U-shaped crossing, depending on, it doesn't matter if you have one crossing guard or two crossing guards, you will only ever cross them in either an L or a U. You will never have both crossing guards going one way and then the other way, if that makes sense. It's hard to describe it without a diagram up here. I don't know, Brandon, if you have a better way to describe it.
The best way to say it is when you have 4 crosswalks, 4-legged intersection, to get from any corner to the school, or from the school to any corner, you only ever need to cross 3. We're trying to reduce the number of places where cars interact with kids. So by using only a maximum of 3 of the crossings, we're eliminating one of those crossings entirely, which is one place where cars conflict or interact with the kids.
Any other questions?
I think we might need to. Hello? Hello? Hello?
So for a 4 crossing and 2 crossing guards, you can cross on the opposite sides. The guards. You can't stand on the opposite sides of the crossings.
So the question is, if you've got a 4-legged crosswalk, so there's 4 marked crosswalks, always stop, and can the crossing? There's 2 crossing guards. So do they not stand on opposite sides? Okay, we're going to do without an actual marked crossing location. John, can you assist me? Or actually, I'm sorry, you're not wearing the proper safety vest. You're not equipped to do the job. So if instead Cassandra could help me. So if you got visualize, we're going to have to visualize here. There's a crosswalk here. There's a crosswalk here. And then there's one here. Okay, there's one over here too, but we're not worried about that one. So Cassandra's on this corner. The question, I stand on this corner or this corner, correct? That is the question. So you guys know your crossings a lot better than we do. You're going to use your judgment wherever you have the greatest number of students from whichever side they're approaching. That's the side you want to stand on. So I have a lot of kids that are coming on this corner. Maybe I want to be on this corner because I have better control, more direct control over them. Maybe Cassandra doesn't have a lot of kids coming from that side, so she wants to be on that corner. That's okay. So when I cross kids, I would cross the kids, get them over to my corner, and let's assume the school's over there. Then Cassandra and I would work together. Together we'd coordinate, go out, the kids would cross, and then we'd return to our corners. I'm simulating the stop sign. And then maybe I need to get to that back to that corner again. So that I may walk myself back to that corner again. if that's where the most students are coming from. That is perfectly acceptable to do that. What we wouldn't do is when I'm crossing kids this way, and Cassandra doesn't have kids out there, she would not be walking out with her stop paddle because she's not crossing any students. So only if you're actively crossing students would you step foot out into the street, or you're crossing yourself. Because she would be stopping traffic that could otherwise turn and get through, turn through or make some movement without being delayed, and there's no kids being crossed. If we stop traffic too much, we may lose respect of the motorists. So we want to be respectful to everybody and minimize those delays as much as possible. That's why we also wait for groups of kids, or if you see more kids are coming, you wait for them to come up, and then you cross them in a group. And if there are more coming from further away, you may ask them to stop. Did that answer your question? Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Another question? Mm-hmm.
And I hate to say this, but what if you get that one parent that's trying to cross and you don't have a bunch of kids there and you're trying to tell that parent to stop, but they just keep going? It's like, because we've experienced that. So what do you do?
Right, that is a really great question. So if you didn't hear the question was, what if you only have one parent who wants to try to cross, but you don't have anybody else waiting, and so you're going to need to stop traffic for one person? So our job as crossing guards are to cross absolutely everybody and to keep everybody safe, whether it's the students or the parents or anybody who's just going for a walk that morning. Whoever it is, our job is to own that crosswalk in that morning. So if there are no other people around, yes, you're going to still do your job and stop traffic and walk that person across safely. Okay. I misunderstood the question. Okay, so the question was actually, there's a group of students further down on the sidewalk that are still making their way toward the crosswalk, but a parent with a child is ready to cross now, and you're telling them, please wait, we're gonna cross in just a minute, and if they don't listen to you and they just cross, what do you do, right? So that is the question. There are going to be times where people don't listen, and your job is just to keep students and parents safe. And so, but again, if they're way down there, so use your best judgment and try to cross as many people as safe as you can. But there will be times where people. You'll see in this there's another scenario coming up where there's something like that does happen. That's not really preventable, but our job is to try to keep as many people safe.
So just to add to that a little bit, I would say ask them if they would please wait for you. If they don't, let them go. If they're walking with their child, they can do that. You can't, legally it's not incorrect. Legally they can do that. But you don't have them force your hand. When you're not ready, don't go out of sequence because of an adult. However, if it's students without their parent or legal guardian, you can tell them, you have to wait for me. But an adult, if they want to cross whenever, even if they want to cross when it says don't walk, you can ask them, please wait for safety and so the kids understand that you're trying to keep them safe. But if after that suggestion they do what they do, let them do their thing. And maybe if it's a big problem and a lot of parents are doing it, maybe ask the principal if the principal can do something to reach out to parents to plead to them. Please, it's for the safety of the students, for respect of the crossing guard and the rules to please follow this. But legally they can. Same thing. If they want to cross 15 feet away from the crosswalk and they choose to cross outside of the crosswalk or at a mid-block location, if it's an adult with their kid, unless there's a sign that says do not cross here, they can technically cross there even if it's not a good idea. But back to the same point we've trying to drive home. Do what you're supposed to. Do the best you can. A lot of stuff happens. So you can control what you do, and ideally what your students can do, what they're doing, but you can't control what motorists are doing, and you can't control what parents do. So just do the best. We know it's not always clean cut, and we show scenarios that are perfect scenarios, and the real world isn't like that. So that's why we try to have a lot of little hiccups and incidents in these demos we're doing. In fact, these weren't even planned hiccups that happened. The guy running through the crosswalk, that just happened. So we kept it so we could share that with you guys to show, yes, it does happen, and you just do the best you can.
So what you just said, that we have to cross everybody? Because when I'm on 36th Street and Thomas, there's a lot of weirdos out there that they just cross. I mean, they're in their own world, and they're just crossing, they're crossing the red and green light, doesn't matter. I'm like, oh my God, I hope you just don't get run over. I hope you don't get run over. But they don't care because they're in a different world, those kind of people. So I just wondering, do we have to cross everybody?
Okay, so the question is, do we really have to cross everybody? Well, as crossing guards, our main job is to cross students. If there are other people crossing in the crosswalk at the same time as the students, obviously we are crossing them as well. If there is one or two people that are not students that just happen to cross, again, what Brandon had just reiterated, they're adults, so legally we do not have to be in charge of them. So thank you for sharing that. So our job is to cross students. That's our number one job. But if there are adults and parents crossing along with the students, it is part of our job to cross them as well. I'm sorry if I confused you.
Yeah, you try, but understandable. I can read between the lines of what you're implying about some of the individuals that might be out there. If you're wearing a heavy coat and it's 110 degrees out, that might be an indication that something else is going on. Do your best to ask them to please wait for you. But if they just walk, you've done your part. You've done your part. You don't have to stop traffic. You don't have to jump out there when you're not ready to protect an adult.
Mm-hmm.
Say you have for the L shape. If one of them have kids and you have kids, can you guys go at the same time to cross them all?
Yes. So the question is, if you are on a L crossing with two crossing guards, can you coordinate and both cross on the opposite legs? The answer to that is yes. Yep. So the only time you would not be crossing is if you don't have any students to cross. We don't want to be stopping traffic if we don't have students to cross. But absolutely, if you both have students to cross, you can both cross.
Lo que quiero preguntarles yo es que hay padres de familia que dejan en los carros a los niños a la mitad de la calle, aunque estén bien recios los carros. No, les digo yo que no los dejen, y dice que eso es mi problema, porque el problema de ella, si los dejan ahí o no. Y si les pasa algo, los responsables somos los que estamos pasando los niños.
So the question was, sometimes there are parents in vehicles that drop off the children in the middle of the street, and then kids are not crossing in the appropriate location, and then a guard feels responsible for that. So I actually have an answer for that, and that is work with your principal to make sure that they give out the right maybe messaging to parents to say not to do that. The principal can also work with the police department to make sure that vehicles are not stopping and dropping kids off, particularly if there are non-stop signs. Do you have any other suggestions?
No, I would have said the same thing. Make sure that you speak to your principal because they would need to clarify that with parents of where the appropriate pickup, drop-off locations are for the school. All right, so we are going to move into our last three scenarios with Max.
Hi, everyone. We have three more scenarios. Maybe it'll help answer some of these questions. Right here, we have a two-way stop with two crossing guards in a U pattern. Over here, our first crossing guard is signaling to stop traffic over here to bring this group of students over. She motions for them to come over. Once they are crossed safely, she returns to her post and allows traffic here to pass through, as you'll see in a second. Now both guards are communicating to each other to cross at the same time and allow students to pass through. You can even see here a kid tries to run out and she stops, letting them know to go back. It's not quite safe yet. And then signal for them to cross. Once they are across, they both return to their post. And they figure these out in the beginning of the school year, where's the best place to stop. If you pause right now, you can see this guy's going for a run right across here. He actually doesn't stop. And as a crossing guard, you want to try to help everybody you can, but you always can't. And you can see that he'll just continue to run on through. So go ahead and play. Over here on this end, we have a crossing guard setting up to cross this leg, and only one guard is needed in this situation because there's no kids over here. So she just crosses one leg over on this side. Next, we have our first signalized stop with one crossing guard and a single leg. The pedestrian button has been pushed and the walk symbol is activated. The crossing guard steps out into traffic, makes sure it's safe, then motions for the kids to come on through. As you can see, the timer is already going down, so you really have less time than you think. And you also notice that some of the students are lagging along, and you may want to encourage them to speed up just to be safe. And if you go ahead and pause for a second. You may also reiterate what Stephen said earlier, is you may want to talk to your city and principal about increasing walk time if you find that this is not enough time. Go ahead and play. And you'll see now he's still out here, and it'll go back to 0 seconds, and he may have to jog a little bit to get back because he may run out of time, so you may need to increase that time. Lastly, we have another single stop with two crossing guards and a single leg. They both cross out to the quarter sections of the crosswalk at the same time when the crosswalk is activated, and then motion for the students to cross. Again, they may be lagging a little bit, so you may want to encourage them to speed up if it's unsafe. Once they are on this side, you'll notice the far crossing guard can return to this side because he's no longer needed and he can get back safely with enough time. This is the best case scenario with having two crossing guards at a signal at the same time. Any questions on any of these scenarios? I don't see any, so I'll go ahead and introduce the Phoenix Police Department traffic regarding laws on crosswalks. Want a laser pointer?
Sure, just in case. All right, cool, thanks. All right, good morning, everybody. I'm Officer Petrie. I also have Officer Kroll with me. We both work out of the Traffic Bureau with the City of Phoenix Police Department. I've actually been with the police department for 28 years. I've been a motor officer for 24 of those years. So we have dealt a lot with the school zones and the crossing guards. So we're going to go through a little bit about the crosswalks and what your duties are, what we can do, because believe me, we understand your frustration with some of these parents and the vehicles because we deal with it all the time. So real quick for this, for crosswalks, there are unmarked and marked crosswalks. Pedestrians must yield to vehicles before entering the roadway, so they just can't jump out hoping vehicles will stop for them. They have to yield to those vehicles. Once they are in that crosswalk, the motorist must yield to the pedestrians in the crosswalk only in half of their roadway, okay? That's a white crosswalk. We'll talk a little bit about the yellow crosswalks here in a minute. But only if they're in their travel way of the crosswalk must those vehicles stop, okay? Motorists may not pass a vehicle stopped at a crosswalk. Next slide, please. So school crossing, a little bit different. These are the yellow school zones or the yellow crosswalks. Yellow crosswalks with portable signs that read no passing, 15 mile an hour per hour, fines double, school in session, and then stop when children in crosswalk. So if motorists must stop for all pedestrians, again, not just children, any pedestrian in that yellow crosswalk, when these signs are out, motorists do have to stop for people in that crosswalk. 15 mile an hour limit applies when the portable signs are out in the street. So if those signs aren't in the street, it's whatever that speed limit is for the roadway. If it's 25, 30. It's only 15 when the portable signs are out in the roadway. And they have to be out there properly. Again, treated as a standard crosswalk when the portable signs are not in the street. Next slide, please. So the operating agreement, little cities are a little bit different, but for the city of Phoenix, they do sign an agreement which allows them to put these signs out into the roadway, and that gives them the times they are supposed to be in the street. Some school zones, you might have to put them up in the morning and pick them up after you're done, and then do the same thing in the afternoon. Some schools in their contract, they do have where these signs can be out all day, from the beginning of school all the way to the end of the school. So depending on what kind of contract they signed with that particular city is when those signs can be out, okay? Next slide, please. So 15 mile an hour zone, 50 mile speed limit is only in effect from the first no passing 15 mile an hour sign to the marked crosswalk. So once they get to that first sign, that 15 mile an hour sign, they have to be at 15 miles an hour. We get this all the time. Well, before I got to the crosswalk, I slowed down to 15. It doesn't work that way. Once you get to that 15 mile an hour sign, that first one, they have to be at 15 miles an hour. And they have to hold that speed, 15 miles an hour, until they get to the crosswalk. And then once they pass that farthest most line of the crosswalk exiting, they can resume that speed of the roadway. Okay? Does that make sense? You changed slides. So passing in a school zone. So unless otherwise directed by a police officer, subject to the exemptions granted to driver an authorized emergency vehicle of this chapter, the driver shall obey the instructions of an official traffic control device applicable to the driver that is in place accordance with this chapter. So basically overtaking in a school zone. Some of these school zones will have 2 lanes for that same direction, right? So if if a vehicle enters that school zone and that is that lead vehicle, nobody is allowed to pass that vehicle, whether it's on the right or the left. They can't overtake any kind of vehicle in that roadway. Even if it's going 10 miles an hour while they're in that school zone, between those signs, they can't pass. Even if they're going 5 miles an hour. A vehicle cannot pass that first vehicle, okay? So no passing in the school zone. Next slide, please. So myths of jaywalking. Crossing other, I know someone was talking about this earlier, crossing other than the crosswalk. Pedestrian crossing a roadway, any part other than within a marked crosswalk or within an unmarked crosswalk of the intersection shall yield the right of way to vehicles of the roadway. A pedestrian crossing a roadway at a point where a pedestrian tunnel or overhead pedestrian crossing has been provided shall yield the right of way to vehicles on the roadway and then between adjacent intersections at traffic control signals. Jaywalking is a little bit confusing. Pedestrians do have to yield to vehicles before they cross the roadway. If they don't yield at all, they can be cited. Then again, if those pedestrians are in a crosswalk, the vehicles do have to yield to those pedestrians in a crosswalk. Next slide, please. So fines do double in school zones, but the officer, there is actually a particular code. We actually have 2 codes to write. So we can write a code that has a double fine, or we can just write a regular school zone that fines don't double. So it actually depends on the officer if they write that particular code. At least for the city of Phoenix, we do have a 0 tolerance, so we can write at 16 miles an hour for a school zone violation for speed. Typically, officers will typically give about 18 to 19, just to give a little bit buffer. Other agencies, they might be a little bit different. But real quick, when we are putting out those signs, when you guys are putting out those signs, a lot of these school zones they have the little markers in the roadway. So please put those signs out where they're designated to be. Don't lengthen that school zone. Don't shorten that school zone. Put those portable signs where they're supposed to be on those little circles, okay? And we can't enforce a school zone, officers can't, if it's not properly posted. So the signs have to be out and they have to be properly posted. So, and if you are missing a school zone sign, let your principal know so they can contact the appropriate jurisdiction of the city to replace those signs if they're damaged or missing, okay? Next slide, please. So crossing guards, please don't go out there and direct traffic. You guys are just there for the kids or the parents using the crosswalk, okay? You guys are hanging yourself out if you guys go out there and start directing traffic. You guys are just there for the pedestrians, okay? I know you guys are trying to think and you're helping trying to empty that parking lot by getting either the buses in or the cars out, but you guys aren't allowed to do that. You guys can't direct any kind of traffic, okay? You guys are just there for the kids. Obviously enforce the law, weigh vehicles through a crosswalk. I have seen this because if you guys are you're trying to be courtesy to maybe the parent, but you're already out in the crosswalk getting ready to cross some kids, but you're trying to be courteous to get maybe that last vehicle through. If you're already out there with your stop sign, don't wave them through. Because what's going to happen next time is, well, I went through last time and the crossing guard said it was okay. So I understand that maybe trying to be a little bit courteous to the drivers, but once you guys are in that crosswalk with your stop sign, nobody's supposed to be in that. Don't direct anybody through, okay? Again, stop vehicles to allow cars or buses to make turns, stand in the roadway, force vehicles to stop. When you guys are trying to cross the kids, don't directly just step out in the crosswalk with your stop sign thinking vehicles might stop. Try to be a little bit courteous to them and allow them ample time or maybe that natural break in traffic before you guys get on the crosswalk. I know it gets really congested at times, but just try to see if you can be a little bit courtesy and try to give them ample time to stop too, okay? Next slide, please. Crossing guards, again, focus on the students and keeping them safe. More important than getting a license plate. We can't do anything if you guys give us a license plate. We can't do anything with that. We actually have to see the violation to give them a citation. So if you give us a license plate saying this is a chronic violator, there's nothing we can do it. We actually have to see it. So on that note, when we are out there at your school zones, nothing makes me happier when I get back after stopping somebody in a school zone, when I come back and the crossing guard comes up to me and says, thank you, because that is one of our violators that's always speeding through. So we are out there. We try to get out there. There's less of us than schools. So we try to hit as many schools as we can throughout the year. But unfortunately, so few of us, you might see us once or twice a year before we have to get to all the other schools, at least in the city of Phoenix. What I would try to do is if you guys have SROs at your school, the school resource officers, maybe reach out to them too, even if they're just out there with their presence out there with their patrol car, okay? Because not only we understand the school zones and the speeding, but again, the parking issues. We know that's kind of a nightmare. Because we'll come out there, you guys have probably seen it. Any new crossing guards or in here? Okay, a couple, but most of you guys have seen this. So you'll see that when we're out there enforcing stuff, everything's fine and dandy for about 2 weeks. And then they realize, oh, the officers aren't here, so they're going to be back doing their same stuff all over again. So we understand that. We try to get back to you guys when we can. But again, try to reach out to your SROs, and maybe they can help out a little bit too. Next slide. So do you guys have any questions regarding your school zones or the signs or anything like that? Questions? No? Yes, right here. Okay, so the question is someone, you're trying to cross some kids, but there's actually a car that's actually blocking the crosswalk, maybe because it's congested or traffic. Just go ahead and hold those pedestrians up as best as you can to get that car out of the crosswalk. Because you don't want to have the kids or parents crossing in between cars just for safety-wise, because you don't want, for some reason, that car that's blocking the crosswalk thinking they're trying to be courteous and try to back out of the crosswalk, and now they back into one of the kids. So try to get that car out of the crosswalk, wait till they're clear, then you can cross the kids or the pedestrians. And I know someone did make a comment about some of the parents might not want to wait for the group that you see the kids coming, you're just trying to wait so you cross them all at once. Unfortunately, if they don't want to listen, we hear it all the time. Parents, you guys see it, they're just rude. They just think they can just do whatever you want. So my best advice is if that parent doesn't want to wait and they cross, you're going to be a good witness if they happen to get hit by a car, right? So just be that good witness. You told them to stop. They didn't want to listen. Something bad might happen. You tried. But don't get into a confrontation with these parents. If there's a chronic violator, let your principal know. They can contact the police department and try to get some enforcement out there. But don't confront the parents or the drivers, because you don't want to put yourself in a situation, okay? Anything else? Did you have something? Right here.
There was a question earlier.
The question earlier, and correct me if I'm wrong, he was asking if there's a crossing guard in the middle of the crosswalk, can a car turn right? Was that correct? That was the earlier question? Okay.
So if you're in that crosswalk and it's a marked school zone and you have your stop sign out, nobody can make any kind of movement on the roadway. So no, they cannot make that right turn while you're still in that crosswalk. That crosswalk has to be 100% clear before anybody either goes straight through or makes any kind of turning movement. They can't enter that crosswalk at all. Even if they're coming out of the private driveway, nope, they have to stop Nobody, vehicles can come through that crosswalk if somebody's in it.
And to clarify, that's a yellow crosswalk.
Correct, that is a yellow crosswalk. If you're some of these big intersections, like you said, if there's no pedestrians on that part of the roadway, yes, they can make a right turn or something if it's a white crosswalk.
So could we drive that point home a little bit more? Because I know that comes up a lot, and I think that's what you're getting at as well. So I'm at a traffic signal. This is my crosswalk from these stairs to these stairs. I'm over here. What your question is, I'll interpret, I guess. You tell me if I'm right. Can a car make a right turn over on that side?
As long as it's a white crosswalk. So if you're at a big intersection controlling maybe the light or something, if that's a white crosswalk, yes. As long as he's not on this part of the intersection where that he's trying to make that turn. If he's all the way on the other side, yes, he can make that right turn. Again, it's got to be a white crosswalk. It can't be a yellow crosswalk.
And that's part of the reason that we suggest 2 crossing guards, because then there's one person on each half of the crosswalk, understanding that you don't decide if you get 2 crossing guards at a location, but it's a lot easier because of that. With just one person, the best we can say is go to the center of the crosswalk. But yeah, it is challenging.
Was that good? Did you understand? Okay. Yes.
If a person or parent gets rude with you in your corner, can you use mace on them?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
You said if a parent gets rude with you, and tries to physically confront you, he wants to know if he can use his mace to defend himself if he's assaulted by a parent.
So my best advice would be, if that is the case, you guys should be equipped with usually your personal cell phone or the radio that maybe the school gives you. Let the school staff know immediately. Or let 911, call 911 immediately so you can get officers out there. Try not to confront them as best as you can. If it's, something that you didn't have, I guess, any other situation to do, yes, you could if you're trying to defend yourself. But my best bet is call 911 so we can get officers out there, get a description of the guy or gal or whoever, and then let us try to deal with it so you don't have to.
I thought he said, could he use some bass? Like it's a bass in your voice to... no
Mace.
bass. You just stepped it up. Back here.
Question, but I just wanted to say, because I work in a two-way street, the one with the yellow lines, and there's a lot of cars that pass us. When I'm already in the middle with the kids, crossing the kids, I'm already in the middle with a bunch of kids, and the cars keep flying. They're going like 60. It's an everyday thing. And what I do, I just tell the kids, wait, make sure the cars are stopping, and all that stuff so they can be safe. But it's an everyday thing. They're always speeding every day.
So I guess it was more of a comment, but she was saying that she's in the middle of her school zone or the crosswalk with the sign out, and she still has cars going through. So, yeah, like you said, hold those kids or the pedestrians on that corner until you can get at least that first vehicle stopped. So, no, I understand that, and like I said, we try to get out to the schools as best as we can to do some enforcement. Right now, at least for the city of Phoenix, we do have a grant from the Governor's Office of Highway Safety. So we are trying to put some more motor officers out there, at least in the morning or in the afternoon, to try to do more of that school zone enforcement.
And if I could add that, are you operating alone that crosswalk? You're the only cross guard there? You are. So that's a case where people are driving while you're out there, I would ask, is it a really wide crossing? Maybe one person and it's a really busy street? Maybe one person isn't enough. So I would maybe appeal to your principal to see if they can take a look for themselves. Maybe even invite them to operate at the crosswalk themselves or see what it looked like. But yeah, yes. So what she said was the principal is covering the crosswalk today because she's here for the training. So he may offer that, who knows, suggestion for a second guard after being out there one day. But that's something that we recommend because obviously police can't be everywhere all the time. And that second guard really does a lot to help just so motorists can see you out there because they're not necessarily expecting to see people in the street. They may not be looking for it like they should. So that's a great way to help address that chronic concern. There was a question right here.
Yo doy el silbato para pasar los niños, me voy yo primero y doy el silbato y atrás de mí ya tengo los carros y los niños estoy pasándolos y no hacen caso, ni los de frente ni los de atrás. Siempre estoy en el medio de los carros, aunque tengan los niños cruzando.
Okay. So she's saying that whenever she crosses children, the children may be in the middle of the crosswalk as she's crossing them and cars are already advancing. I asked, and she mentions it is a yellow crosswalk. So my suggestion would be the same as the past question that was asked. Try to work with your school to get either a second crossing guard and also to contact the police department in the city that you work in. Try to get some people out there, see if they can do some enforcement.
And I know the schools try to get ahead of it with putting out newsletters at the beginning of the school year where drop-offs are, how to come in. And so we've actually seen schools when the parents follow the plan that the city and the schools come up with. Sometimes it waits a little bit, but it actually works. But we understand parents, again, just figure they can do whatever they want, but hopefully the school can at least try to get ahead of it, put those flyers out, let the parents know where to drop their kids off or how to pull into the parking lot and drop their kids off. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much.
All right. So we wanted to thank you all for coming.